Welcome back to another episode of Bree Talks MMA. In today's episode, we are going to be doing a UFC 300 deep dive. If you've watched my deep dive videos before, I love to get into the stats. I love to break down the details. So I'm super excited to break down this historic card. UFC 300 is going to be one of the biggest events in combat sports history. I'm super excited to be a part of it. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Before we get into the video, let's take a moment and thank our sponsors. Today's episode is sponsored by Farmers Insurance District Manager Mark Lee. With over 30 years of experience with Farmers Insurance, Mark Lee is an excellent mentor and leader to both rookie and veteran agents. Whether you already have an insurance background, are looking to break into the industry, or dream of a career that provides freedom and flexibility, Mark Lee can provide you with the necessary guidance and resources to help make those goals a reality. Contact Mark Lee today to learn more about this unique career opportunity. This episode is also sponsored by The Fighting Now. The Fighting Now is an MMA media outlet dedicated to providing exposure for fighters both on a pro and amateur level in women's combat sports. From exclusive interviews to fight announcements, The Fighting Now is your go-to source for all things women's combat sports. You can follow The Fighting Now on Instagram and YouTube at The Fighting Now. Thank you so much to all my sponsors. I truly appreciate your support. Now let's get into the video. I have not done a deep dive episode in a while, but I'm really excited to because UFC 300 is definitely the biggest combat sports event of the year, if not the decade, maybe ever. I mean, this event is going to be insane. And I know there was some criticism of the matchups early on when it first was announced, but I think we can all agree that this card is going to go down as one of the greatest UFC events of all time. I'm going to start at the bottom with the early prelims, and I'm going to start with the first fight on the card, and then I'm going to work my way up to the main event, the light heavyweight title fight between Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira, and I am so excited for you guys to hear my prediction. So let's go ahead and start with Deiveson Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt, the first fight on the early prelims. I am so excited to see this. This is going to be Deiveson Figueiredo's second fight moving up to bantamweight. And I really like Deiveson Figueiredo at bantamweight. I think this was a great move for him. He's had some issues with weight cutting in the past. He's missed weight. He even missed weight for a title fight, which you never want to do. So I really like this for him. I think that he looks great at bantamweight. I thought his wrestling looked fantastic. I thought his striking looked fantastic in his initial fight at bantamweight with Rob Font. But I am curious how he's going to do with someone who has such good striking like Cody Garbrandt. And, I know he's had some losses, and unfortunately, two of those were to TJ Dillashaw, who we later found out, had been cheating. But I think it's a lot of times fans that they don't remember Cody Garbrandt the same way we do. They don't remember watching Cody Garbrandt when he was champion. They don't remember, it's all recency bias in my opinion, because if you look at Cody Garbrandt, even in his last fight, and even in some fights that he lost, you can see that the talent is there. He's got really fast hands. He's got good wrestling. So I think this is a really interesting fight. And I want to run through the numbers on it first, because it's hard to predict, because I'm not sure how much of a size advantage did Deiveson Figueiredo have at flyweight. Will moving up to bantamweight maybe be a good thing for him, or I don't know. I mean, Cody Garbrandt, he's not a huge bantamweight. He almost really is built more like a flyweight, and he's fought at flyweight before. So I think that this is probably one of the better matchups that you could make for Deiveson Figueiredo coming into this division. You don't want to put him with somebody like Corey Sandhagen or Sean O'Malley. You don't want to put him with somebody who is really tall, really long. He's short. He's only 5'5", but I don't feel like he's really undersized for the division by any means. So let's just run through the numbers real quick, and then I'll kind of figure out what I think. Deiveson Figueiredo, he is 22-3 in professional MMA. He has 9 wins via knockout. He has 8 wins via submission, 5 wins via decision, 1 knockout loss, 1 submission loss, and 1 decision loss. So he has been in the UFC for quite a while. He has 15 UFC fights. So he's definitely a vet. He's been in a lot of 5-rounders as well. So lots of experience for Deiveson Figueiredo. His UFC record is 11-3 with 1 draw. And his record in his last 5 fights is 2-2 with 1 draw. 2-2 when you're fighting on the level that he is at, mostly at flyweight. I would say that's actually pretty good. The 1 draw, which I believe was the fight with Moreno, one of their 4 fights. Cody Garbrandt is 14-5. He has 11 wins via knockout. He has 0 submission wins and 3 decision wins. He has 4 knockout losses, 0 submission losses, and 1 decision loss. His total number of UFC fights are 14, so he's at 14 fights under his belt in the UFC, and his UFC record is 9-5. He is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. So Deiveson Figueiredo is 36 years old. Cody Garbrandt is 32. Deiveson Figueiredo is 5'5", and Cody Garbrandt is 5'7". So Cody Garbrandt is a little bit younger, and he's also a little bit taller. The advantage in reach is going to go to Deiveson Figueiredo. Despite being the shorter fighter, he is going to have a 3-inch reach advantage. Cody Garbrandt has a 65-inch reach. Figueiredo has a 68-inch reach. They are both orthodox stance fighters. And now let's look at the striking statistics. This is really interesting to me because I think that this fight is going to come down to the grappling, or if they can't get each other to the ground, which I would think that Figueiredo would initiate the grappling, then I think it's going to come down to the striking. So we'll see if Figueiredo can get him to the ground. I think he has a good chance of winning this fight. But if he can't, or if he can't keep him on the ground, then, he might be in for a long night, because striking with Cody Garbrandt is a nightmare for anyone. 3.08 significant strikes landed per minute for Deiveson Figueiredo, 3.06 for Cody Garbrandt, so pretty close numbers there. Striking accuracy is going to be higher for Deiveson Figueiredo at 55%. 40% for Cody Garbrandt. Strikes absorbed per minute, 3.46 for Deiveson Figueiredo, 3.91 for Cody Garbrandt. Striking defense is 51% for Deiveson Figueiredo and 60% for Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt has great footwork. He has great head movement. So despite sometimes when he has been caught with things and he has been knocked out, I would say he actually has pretty good defense when you look at his technique. It's an interesting matchup because you don't think of Deiveson Figueiredo as a striker, but he actually does have good striking. I don't think Deiveson Figueiredo is going to get knocked out in this fight necessarily. I think it would probably be more likely that Cody Garbrandt would be knocked out just because, I mean, it's happened before, but I think that it's going to be easier for Cody Garbrandt to land and be accurate against Figueiredo than it is for Figueiredo to land and be accurate against Cody Garbrandt. Now let's kind of take a look at the grappling statistics, because this is where I think if Figueiredo can get Cody to the ground, I think this is where he's going to do a lot of great work. So Deiveson Figueiredo, 1.65 takedown average versus 1.1 for Cody Garbrandt. Takedown accuracy is 44% for Deiveson Figueiredo and 34% for Cody Garbrandt. Average submission attempts per minute, 1.6 for Deiveson Figueiredo and 0 for Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt, not a big submission guy. I do think he does have very good defensive grappling, though. And his takedown defense is 80% versus Deiveson Figueiredo has 58% takedown defense. I'm not sure that Deiveson is necessarily going to need his takedown defense in this fight unless Cody Garbrandt is trying to score points, get on top, do some damage. I really don't think that Figueiredo is going to be in much danger on the ground with Cody Garbrandt. I actually think Cody Garbrandt is going to be in a lot more danger than Figueiredo. I do think he eventually will be able to get this fight to the ground. I just don't know how easy it's going to be. I think it's going to be difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. I do think he's going to be able to pull it off. Total takedowns landed in the UFC. Deiveson Figueiredo has landed 20 takedowns. Cody Garbrandt has landed 10. So double the amount of takedowns for Figueiredo. Here's a very interesting statistic. They've both landed 11 knockdowns in the UFC, which is actually pretty high. So especially in those lower weight classes. So that just tells you that they have unreal power for that division. I'd probably give a slight edge to Figueiredo just because he's improved so much lately with his striking. I mean, he went toe-to-toe with Rob Font, who I believe is one of the best boxers in the UFC. So I think that it just shows how good Figueiredo is everywhere. I mean, you can't get away with being one-dimensional in these divisions. You have to be well-rounded. And I think that's what makes this such a beautiful fight, is that both of these fighters are extremely well-rounded. They're great grapplers, great strikers, very fast. So it's so interesting. Now, here's another interesting statistic on the other side. So the number of times knocked down in the UFC. Deiveson Figueiredo has only been knocked down 1 time. Cody Garbrandt has been knocked down 7 times. So that is one thing that I do kind of worry about with Cody Garbrandt, because while I do think he has the better striking, I give Figueiredo the edge because I think that Figueiredo could catch him. I don't know that Cody Garbrandt is going to land a lucky one-punch knockout on Figueiredo. I've seen Figueiredo face a lot of adversity, and I've seen him in, his wars with Brandon Moreno. So I just don't know if Cody Garbrandt is going to be the one to knock him out. I think he could end up getting in that situation when he faces somebody like Corey Sandhagen or Sean O'Malley, even Cheeto Vera, I think. So I'm just not sure that this fight necessarily is really where we're going to see a ton of adversity for Figueiredo with like getting knocked out or anything like that. I think he could get outpointed. A really interesting statistic, most strikes landed in one fight. So Figueiredo has landed 137 strikes in one fight, and the highest that Cody Garbrandt has landed is 68. So that just really intrigues me, because Cody Garbrandt is so fast, but he's gotten a lot more patient lately too. So I feel like sometimes used to get a little aggressive in there, used to get a little emotional, but I don't see that in him anymore. I see a very patient, calculated fighter in Cody Garbrandt, especially his last performance when he knocked out Brian Kelleher. It's hard to judge off that performance just because Brian Kelleher is a completely different fighter than Deiveson Figueiredo. Deiveson Figueiredo, we're talking about a former champion. So it's interesting. But I do love the fact that Figueiredo is moving up to 135. And with this being his second fight, I liked what I saw in the Rob Font fight, so I am kind of leaning towards Figueiredo, but I don't know. Garbrandt is still evolving, and I really like what I've seen from him lately, and it's just he's faced a lot of adversity in his career and his life, so I want Cody Garbrandt to win, but if I'm doing predictions here and I'm saying who I think is going to win, I'm leaning towards Figueiredo. He's just got really good wrestling, really good jiu-jitsu. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Like I said, extremely fast hands, good counters. He throws really nice body shots, which I think will really do some damage in this fight and kind of wear out Cody Garbrandt. He threw a nasty left hook that hurt Rob Font. I thought he was about to finish the fight. So he's just got some real power with his punches, and I think his power is even better at 135. I don't know. We could be completely underestimating Cody Garbrandt. I don't know what to expect as far as where the fight is going to go. I would think that it will eventually go to the ground. If I had to predict this, I would say probably Figueiredo via TKO. We'll see. I also think Garbrandt has a real possibility to win this on the scorecards. The second fight on the early prelims, Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. This is probably one of the fights I'm most excited for because they are two veterans of the sport. And if you didn't already watch my prediction video on this fight, then you can go back and watch that one. It's probably not going to be much different than what I'm about to say here. So I'll just kind of go through the stats and kind of give my final thoughts on it and what I think is going to happen. Jim Miller is 37-17 in professional MMA. Bobby Green is 31-15. Jim Miller has 7 knockout wins. Bobby Green has 11. Jim Miller has 20 submission wins. Bobby Green has 9. Jim Miller has 10 decision wins versus Bobby Green has 11. Jim Miller has 2 knockout losses. Bobby Green has 5. And the submission losses. So Jim Miller has lost by submission 3 times. Bobby Green has lost by submission twice. And Jim Miller has lost 12 decisions versus 8 for Bobby Green. Jim Miller, the most UFC fights in history of any UFC fighter. He has 43 UFC fights. That is a huge deal. Bobby Green has 24 UFC fights, which is still a lot of UFC fights. So definitely both these guys are seasoned veterans. They have seen everything. And Jim Miller, his record in the UFC is 26-16 with 1 no contest. Bobby Green is 12-10 with 1 draw and 1 no contest. The record in their last 5, 4-1 for Jim Miller and 2-2 with 1 no contest for Bobby Green. Jim Miller is 40 years old versus Bobby Green, who's a little bit younger. He's 37. And Jim Miller is 5'8", so he's a little bit shorter. Bobby Green's 5'10". Jim Miller and Bobby Green both have a 71-inch reach. Jim Miller is a southpaw. Bobby Green is orthodox. Now, I always kind of mention this. Bobby Green does often switch stances, so you will see him in southpaw quite a bit. I actually think he's better in southpaw than he is in orthodox, especially defensively, and I kind of went into that on my last video on this fight. But so in December, Bobby Green was knocked out by Jalen Turner, and it was a pretty devastating knockout. It was a late stoppage. So I am really curious how that's going to affect him. Of course, he's still going to fight like Bobby Green. He's still going to have the same skills. I just don't know if he's going to have the same chin, you know. That is one thing I'm really concerned about. I'm actually surprised they booked this fight as soon as they did. Maybe Bobby Green's just hungry to get back in there and get back in the win column, and so he wants to return, you know, as quickly as he can. But, you know, we saw what happened with Alex Volkanovski coming off the knockout loss, so I just don't think this is going to go much differently as far as, like, his durability in the fight. Jim Miller, not really a super technical striker. I mean, he didn't even start doing striking training, like, until he was in the UFC. So he was doing striking training at like a cardio kickboxing gym back in the day. So it's not like he's a striker, but he does have good striking. I mean, you fight enough times, you will learn striking. And it's actually probably sometimes a better way to learn striking is just, you know, experiencing it and having that octagon time, that cage time. So I really do like Jim Miller's chances in this fight. I think that, you know, a lot of people might think he's going to win via submission, but I actually think it's more likely that he gets a knockout or a decision here. So let's run through the striking statistics for Jim Miller versus Bobby Green. Jim Miller, 2.96 significant strikes landed per minute. Bobby Green, 6.14. Jim Miller has 42% striking accuracy versus 52% for Bobby Green. So Bobby Green, the more accurate and more volume-heavy striker. And the strikes absorbed per minute, 3.18 for Jim Miller, 3.74 for Bobby Green. Striking defense, 58% for Jim Miller and 62% for Bobby Green. So, like I said, Bobby Green has really good defense. It's just sometimes he gets caught. So now let's look into the grappling statistics, because I do think we will see some grappling in this fight, and I hope we do, because Jim Miller is one of my favorite fighters to watch with grappling. He is such an excellent grappler. His guillotine is incredible. His rear naked chokes. He is just a monster on the ground and a problem for anybody if you get taken down by Jim Miller. If he gets a hold of your back, he has excellent back control. He's great off of his back. He's just a problem everywhere. So he's a really dangerous fighter, and I am just so excited for this. But let's get into the numbers. So 1.58 takedown average for Jim Miller, 1.2 for Bobby Green, 44% takedown accuracy for Jim Miller, and 37% for Bobby Green. Takedown defense, 48% for Jim Miller, and 74% for Bobby Green. So very good takedown defense for Bobby Green. And average submission attempts per 15 minutes, 1.7 for Jim Miller and 0.3 for Bobby Green. So Jim Miller, very active on the ground, always looking for submissions, doing damage, landing ground and pound. He is just a very offensive fighter, but also has excellent defense as well. Total takedowns landed in the UFC. 44 takedowns landed for Jim Miller in his career. That is a lot. I mean, I know he's been in a lot of fights, but still a lot of takedowns. 20 takedowns landed in the UFC for Bobby Green. Total knockdowns landed. Jim Miller has landed 6 knockdowns. Bobby Green has landed 5. Jim Miller has been knocked down twice, and Bobby Green has been knocked down 5 times. Bobby Green is a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and of course, Jim Miller is a black belt. He's been a black belt in jiu-jitsu for a long time. He is truly a well-rounded fighter. I actually think both of these guys are extremely well-rounded. I think that Jim Miller has the better grappling. Bobby Green has the better striking, but I do think they both have opportunities both on the ground and on the feet. So this is going to be so interesting. I don't know how to predict this, but I am leaning towards Jim Miller. And I actually think if I were to do a prediction on this, I think I would pick Jim Miller via knockout or TKO. So I think that either Jim Miller is going to catch Bobby Green with a right hook or some type of like a 2-3 combination, a counter, or he is going to get Bobby Green to the ground, land ground and pound, and finish him there. So that is my prediction. I also think Bobby Green could get a knockout here. And I'm definitely not sleeping on Bobby Green because you never can. I just am a little concerned about him coming back so soon off of the knockout loss. So we'll see what happens. I could be totally wrong, and I love both these fighters, so I actually really want to see both of them win. But at the end of the day, I'm here to do predictions. So yeah, I got to go with Jim Miller here. Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. I am so excited for this. These are 2 of the most terrifying strikers in the strawweight division, in women's history in general. These are just some absolute killers. So let's just get into the numbers first, and then we'll kind of talk about this because I am so excited for this fight. I think this might be, gosh, it's hard to predict which fight's going to be fight of the night, but this I think has a good chance. So Jessica Andrade is 25-12 in MMA. Marina Rodriguez is 17-3. Jessica Andrade has 10 wins via knockout, 8 wins via submission, 7 wins via decision, and Marina Rodriguez has 7 knockout wins. She has 1 submission win and 9 decision wins. Jessica Andrade has 5 knockout losses, 4 submission losses, and 3 decision losses. Marina Rodriguez has 1 knockout loss, 0 submission losses, and 2 decision losses. Total number of UFC fights for Jessica Andrade is double that of Marina Rodriguez. So Jessica Andrade has 26 UFC fights under her belt. She's an absolute veteran of women's MMA. And Marina Rodriguez is 13, so she is going to be going into her 14th fight in the UFC octagon. In the UFC, Jessica Andrade has 16 wins and 10 losses. Marina Rodriguez has 8 wins, 3 losses, and 2 draws. They are both 3-2 in their last 5 fights. Jessica Andrade is 32 years old. Marina Rodriguez is 36. Jessica is 5'2". Marina has a significant height advantage at 5'7". Jessica Andrade is a 62-inch reach, and Marina Rodriguez will have a 3-inch reach advantage with a 65-inch reach. They're both orthodox fighters, and let's get into the striking statistics, because I think this fight is going to spend a decent amount of time on the feet. I do expect some grappling, but we'll see if it gets to that point. I don't know. I think this fight might end in a finish, and I think it might be on the feet. So Jessica Andrade has 6.67 significant strikes landed per minute. That's actually really good. Marina Rodriguez, 4.77. 50% striking accuracy for Jessica Andrade, 48% striking accuracy for Marina Rodriguez. Strikes absorbed per minute is going to be 5.36 for Jessica Andrade, 2.89 for Marina Rodriguez. Striking defense is going to be 54% for Jessica Andrade, 56% for Marina Rodriguez. Takedown average. So now we're getting into some grappling statistics. Takedown average for Jessica Andrade is 2.45 and 0.25 for Marina Rodriguez. Takedown accuracy, 54% for Jessica Andrade, 42% for Marina Rodriguez. So while I do believe that Marina Rodriguez has a little bit of an advantage in the striking, I do think that Andrade has a big advantage in the grappling. So, and the numbers don't really reflect that for Marina Rodriguez, but I think it's really just because Jessica Andrade has so many more fights, and she was champion, and you know she's changed a lot in her career. I mean, she looked amazing in the Mackenzie Dern fight, but Mackenzie Dern's not a striker. So she's going to be fighting a real Muay Thai specialist in Marina Rodriguez. So that's why I think that Marina does have the advantage in the striking, just on a technical basis, not so much based on the numbers. But on the numbers, it kind of looks like Andrade does. So we'll see. It'll be really interesting. But technique-wise, I do think that Marina Rodriguez has the better striking. Takedown defense. So Jessica Andrade has 72% takedown defense, and Marina Rodriguez has 66%. So still pretty high takedown defense. I mean, it could be higher, but I don't know. I don't know if this fight is going to go to the ground. If it does, I think it might take a little while, because you have to be careful with a Muay Thai specialist like Marina Rodriguez. You have to be careful going for takedowns. So if Jessica Andrade wants to get this fight to the ground, which is where I think she would probably be the safest, I think that she's going to have to work for it, and she's going to have to be creative. So total takedowns landed in the UFC, Jessica Andrade has 39. Marina Rodriguez, not much of a grappler. She only has 3. Total knockdowns landed in the UFC. Now, this is where Jessica Andrade's power really comes in. She has a ton of power. She has landed 7 knockdowns in the UFC. Marina Rodriguez has landed 2, but Jessica Andrade has been knocked down 3 times in the UFC. So on the ground, Jessica Andrade, she's a great wrestler, great jiu-jitsu specialist. She's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. She's got a slick submission game. She's really strong. She's really powerful, very explosive. So I expect this fight to be absolutely insane. I think if it stays on the feet too long, then I think Marina Rodriguez can finish this fight just with her. Man, I don't know if anybody really watches women's MMA or how much you guys watch women's MMA, but if you haven't seen Marina Rodriguez, her striking is it's nasty. Her Muay Thai is incredible. She has a nasty Thai clinch where she throws really nice knees to the body and head. She's very long for the division. She's tall. She's never been submitted. So this is a tough fight for Andrade. Honestly, anytime I see a Muay Thai specialist against, you know, a very pressure-heavy grappler like Andrade, it does kind of make me want to lean towards the Muay Thai specialist. But at the same time, you know, Andrade does have good striking, and she does have a lot of power in her hands. The weird thing about Andrade is she's really patient, but she also kind of likes to brawl. Like, she'll get in those kind of dirty exchanges, and she has good counters. So with Marina Rodriguez, just the way her style is, I could see her opening herself up for some counters. But at the same time, I think that Andrade needs to be very careful moving in on Marina Rodriguez, because I think that Marina Rodriguez could throw some knees, throw some nice elbows, and really do some damage to Andrade. So if I had to predict this fight, I would probably say Marina Rodriguez via knockout or TKO. They're both pretty well-rounded, but I would say Andrade is the more well-rounded fighter. I just think that Marina is the more technical fighter on the feet. As long as she can keep the fight standing, I think that Marina Rodriguez has a very good chance to win this fight. Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. So Jalen Turner, he is coming off of a brutal knockout win over Bobby Green. Renato Moicano is coming off a decision win over Drew Dober. So if you look at them as of recently, I really do like what Jalen Turner has done. Even the fights that he's lost have been close fights. So it's really hard to judge him by his record. His MMA record is 14-7. Renato Moicano definitely has the more impressive resume at 18-5. Jalen Turner with 10 wins via knockout, 4 wins via submission, and 0 decision wins. So he has a 100% finish rate. Renato Moicano has 0 knockout wins, but he has 10 submission wins and 8 decision wins. So For Jalen Turner, he has been knocked out 3 times, and he has lost to a decision 4 times. Renato Moicano, he has 3 knockout losses, 1 submission loss, and 1 decision loss. Jalen Turner has 12 fights in the UFC. Renato Moicano has 15. Jalen Turner's 8-4 in the UFC, and Renato Moicano is 10-5. Jalen Turner is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. Renato Moicano is 4-1. Jalen Turner is 28. Jalen Turner is the younger fighter here. He is 28 years old compared to Renato Moicano, who is 34. Jalen Turner is freakishly long and tall for this division. He is 6'3" with a 77-inch reach. So I think that's going to be a huge difference maker for him in this fight. Renato Moicano is 5'11", and he has a 72-inch reach. So Renato Moicano has a 4-inch disadvantage in the height and a 5-inch disadvantage in the reach. Jalen Turner is a southpaw. Renato Moicano is orthodox. Let's go through the numbers on the striking. I definitely think Jalen Turner has a giant advantage in the striking in this fight. Jalen Turner, 6.02 significant strikes landed per minute. 4.41 for Renato Moicano, 48% striking accuracy for Jalen Turner, 47% for Renato Moicano, 4.63 strikes absorbed per minute for Jalen Turner, and 3.8 for Renato Moicano. Striking defense is 41% for Jalen, 60% for Renato. Now let's get into the grappling. This is where I think Renato has a major advantage. So takedown average for Jalen Turner is 0.88. 1.8 for Renato Moicano. Jalen has 55% takedown accuracy. Renato has 47%. Takedown defense for Jalen Turner is 75% and 72% for Renato Moicano. Average submission attempts per 15 minutes, 1.2, 0.6 for Renato. Total takedowns landed in the UFC, 5 takedowns for Jalen Turner, 17 takedowns for Renato Moicano. Total knockdowns landed, 7 for Jalen Turner, 1 for Renato Moicano. Jalen Turner has been knocked down twice, and Renato Moicano has 3 knockdowns. So he has been knocked down 3 times. Renato Moicano trains at American Top Team. He's a high-level black belt. So I really do think that Renato has a huge advantage in the grappling. Not only is he a black belt and he's Brazilian, but he is also training with some excellent grapplers. At ATT, they've got Mateusz Gamrot, they've got Grant Dawson, they've got Dakota Bush. Yeah, I think Renato Moicano has a big advantage on the ground. I think if he gets this fight to the ground, he has a good chance of winning. But I do think that Jalen Turner's height and reach is going to be a huge problem for Renato Moicano. I don't know how Renato is going to get past that. This is a classic striker versus grappler. I mean, Jalen Turner, to his credit, he does have some good jiu-jitsu. He's a brown belt, so it's not like he's a rookie, you know, like he knows his way around on the ground. So if this fight goes to the ground, it doesn't necessarily mean Renato is going to get a submission right away. It just means that he's definitely going to be winning the fight if it goes to the ground. So I think if Renato Moicano were to win here, I think it would be a decision. I don't think it would be a submission, although a submission is definitely possible. I definitely think that Jalen Turner has a big advantage of the striking. So if Renato Moicano is unable to get this fight to the ground, or if he's unable to keep Jalen Turner on the canvas, I think that Jalen Turner is going to win via knockout. So that is my prediction. I really like Renato Moicano, and I think he's extremely talented on the ground. But if this fight stays on the feet, I just don't see how he's going to win. So I absolutely think that Jalen Turner has the advantage on the feet. So as long as his takedown defense is on point, I think he's got this in the bag. So I'm going with Jalen Turner by knockout. So now we are moving to the first fight on the prelims. So we just wrapped up the early prelims. Now we're moving to Sodiq Yusuff versus Diego Lopes. This is such an interesting fight. I really wasn't expecting this to be made. I wasn't expecting Diego to be on UFC 300, but I'm really happy about it because he's really fun to watch. So let's just get into the stats right away. So Sodiq Yusuff, he is 13-3. Diego Lopes is 23-6. Sadiq Yusuff has 6 wins via knockout, 1 win via submission, 6 wins via decision. Diego Lopes has 9 wins via knockout, 12 wins via submission, and 2 wins via decision. Sadiq Yusuff has lost via knockout once and lost via decision twice, never been submitted. Diego Lopes has 2 knockout losses and 4 decision losses. In the UFC, Sadiq Yusuff has 7 wins and 2 losses. Diego Lopes has 2 wins and 1 loss. In their last 5, Sadiq Yusuff is 3-2, and Diego Lopes is 4-1 in his last 5. Sadiq Yusuff is 1 year older. He is 30 years old, and Diego Lopes is 29. Sadiq Yusuff is going to be the shorter fighter here. He is 5'9". Diego Lopes is 5'11". The reach is pretty similar. Sadiq Yusuff has a 71-inch reach. Diego Lopes has 72-inch reach. They are both orthodox fighters. Now let's get into the striking statistics. So Sadiq Yusuff, he is definitely going to have the advantage in the striking here. He is a very technical striker. He went 5 rounds with Edson Barboza. So if you're not a great striker, that you're just not going to do that. So I really am a fan of Sadiq Yusuff, and I really do like his striking. Significant strikes landed per minute is 5.72 for Sadiq Yusuff versus 2.47 for Diego Lopes. Striking accuracy, 49% for Sadiq Yusuff, 53% for Diego Lopes. Strikes absorbed per minute, 4.33 for Sadiq and 4.91 for Diego. Striking defense, 54% for Sadiq Yusuff, 37% for Diego Lopes. So pretty low defense. That's pretty low for Diego. So that is a big concern, especially with him facing a striker as good and as volume heavy as Sadiq Yusuff. That is definitely a big concern for me in this fight. Takedown average 0.28 for Sadiq Yusuff, 0 for Diego Lopes. Takedown accuracy 20% for Sadiq Yusuff, and obviously Diego hasn't taken anybody down. So takedown defense 62%, pretty good takedown defense. Could be better, but that's actually pretty good. 42% for Diego Lopes. So average submission attempts per 15 minutes, 0.4 for Sadiq Yusuff, 5.3 for Diego Lopes. Diego is a black belt on the ground, so as long as Sadiq doesn't get taken down or doesn't end up in a bad position somehow, like if he gets knocked down or anything like that, I think that this fight will work out really well for Sadiq. So my prediction for Sadiq Yusuff versus Diego Lopes is Sadiq Yusuff via knockout. That is my prediction. I do think that Diego Lopes is extremely entertaining, fun to watch. He's honestly one of my favorite fighters that's kind of like gained popularity lately, but I do think that Sadiq Yusuff has a huge advantage in the striking. Holm versus Kayla Harrison. This is a fight between 2 of the absolute best combat sports athletes, and not just women's combat sports. I'm talking combat sports overall. These 2 ladies are just absolutely incredible, what they've accomplished in their careers, not only in MMA, but for Kayla Harrison, her accomplishments in judo, with winning gold medals in the Olympics, and Holm, who is a boxing Hall of Famer, a former boxing champion, the only boxing champion to also have won a UFC championship. This to me is a legacy fight. I think if she wins a UFC championship, she would be the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. And if Holm wins this fight, this is huge for her. This is a huge win to have on her resume. And just the whole story behind this is incredible because of the Holm versus Ronda Rousey fight, and how that actually worked out was not what people expected. And I think that we could see something similar to that here. I do really like Kayla Harrison, though, and I think that she has had probably the more impressive career as of late, but we can't forget what Holm has accomplished and just the fact that she's evolved still in her career. She's really, really talented, and she actually has underrated grappling. So let's go ahead and get into the statistics for Holm versus Kayla Harrison. So Holm is 15-6 with 1 no contest. Kayla Harrison is 16-1. Holm has 8 knockout wins and 7 decision wins. Kayla Harrison has 6 knockout wins, 6 submission wins, and 4 decision wins. Holly Holm has lost via knockout once, submission once, and decision 4 times. Kayla Harrison has 1 decision loss. Holly Holm has 15 UFC fights, and several of those are title fights. Kayla Harrison has no UFC fights. This is her UFC debut, which is absolutely insane. She has 17 professional MMA fights under her belt, along with her judo background. This is just, it's a debut, but it doesn't feel like a debut just because of how much she's accomplished in her career so far. The UFC record for Holly Holm is 8-6 with 1 no contest, and in their last 5 fights, Holly Holm is 3-1 with 1 no contest. Kayla Harrison is 4-1. Holly Holm is 42 years old, so she's definitely going to be the older fighter in this matchup. Kayla Harrison is 33. Now, if you remember, when she fought Ronda Rousey, she was 6 years older than Ronda Rousey. So there's a little bit more of an age gap here. But just to remind you guys, you know, we've seen this story before where she was older, you know, and a lot of people doubted her in that fight. So you can never count Holly Holm out, ever. The reach for Holly Holm is 70 inches. So she does have a little bit of a reach advantage. Kayla Harrison has a 66-inch reach. Holly Holm is a southpaw. And yeah, I just think that this fight, I've kind of gone back and watched some of their fights back. Obviously, Kayla Harrison, she's got insane grappling. You just don't see judo translated to MMA as well as Kayla Harrison does it, I think. Hector Lombard did it really well, and there's, you know, obviously more examples. In Khabib had a judo background as well. Amanda Ribas has a judo background. So you see it, and you see it translated to MMA, but it's rare. So when you do see it done very well, it's very impressive. So I always get excited to watch Kayla Harrison fight. But I do want to take some time to appreciate some things about Holly Holm. Holly Holm, 5 out of 6 of her losses have been either a 25-minute fight, so all 5 rounds, or happened in the 5th round. So 5 out of 6 of her losses, those fights, went to a 5th round. The fight with Cyborg, she won scorecards on that in the first 3 rounds. So very interesting statistics, and I point that out because Holm has had a lot of 5-round experience, and I think that's huge. This is a 3-round fight, but I think it's important to highlight that because when you look at the record side by side, you know, it's kind of hard to compare because Holly Holm has had probably more cage time, even though technically Kayla Harrison has like the better record. I do think that Holly Holm has a lot more cage time. So Holm has just excellent footwork. She has really fast hands. Her combinations are spectacular. You can tell she comes from a boxing background, but she's one of the few that's been able to really translate it to MMA and mix it up with kickboxing as well. She has excellent lateral movement. Her footwork is just a thing of beauty. I don't think people appreciate her footwork enough. She has excellent counters, and like I said, she has underrated grappling. So I actually think that Holly Holm presents a lot of problems for Kayla Harrison. One of the big question marks in this fight is that Kayla Harrison is not going to be able to make weight because she's never fought at 135 before. So how is this weight cut going to affect her? Is she even going to be able to make weight? If she doesn't make weight, is Holly Holm going to accept the fight? So I think that, honestly, there is a big chance that Kayla Harrison could miss weight. But I do think that's a real possibility that we have to think about. And is that weight cut going to be too much for Harrison? I really do think that people are underestimating Holly Holm in this fight. And while I do think that Harrison has an advantage just because she's so good on the ground, I don't know how she's going to handle Holly Holm striking. Now, the only thing with Holly Holm is, yes, she is getting older. She's not the same Holly Holm necessarily that she used to be, but she's still having great moments in her fights, and she's still getting some wins. I mean, I know the last fight didn't go her way. The fight with, I think her last fight was with Bueno Silva, and Bueno Silva ended up submitting her, even though it doesn't count as a loss on her record, technically. So originally she had a submission loss to Bueno Silva, but it was overturned because Silva tested positive for an ADHD medication. So it's really kind of dumb. But technically, Holly Holm is coming off of a no contest. I would consider it coming off a loss. But if you look at her last 5 fights, I mean, yeah, she lost that fight, but she lost a split decision to Ketlen Vieira, and she has a win over Yana Santos, which that was a really impressive win. That's where she really showed off her grappling. She has a win over Irene Aldana, who was fighting for a title against Amanda Nunes not too long ago. She has a win over the current champion, Raquel Pennington, and that's all in her last 5 fights. So I do think people are definitely sleeping on Holly Holm. And I do think that Kayla Harrison is really talented, and I don't see how you could possibly lose your UFC debut. I mean, I just think that's too much on the line, you know, to lose that fight. I think that's a must win for Kayla Harrison. So I do think that for that reason, I'm going to pick Kayla Harrison, but I do think that Holly Holm is going to give her a lot of problems. And I do think this fight is going to go all 3 rounds. I think it's going to be, this might be a war, honestly. I just don't know, because if Kayla can get it to the ground, then I think it's going to be really difficult for Holly Holm. I just think that Kayla Harrison needs to get it to the ground. I think that's what she's absolutely going to have to do. So we'll see. But I am predicting Kayla Harrison by decision. But don't get me wrong, I want to pick Holly Holm so bad, and the only reason I'm not is because this is Kayla Harrison's UFC debut. She's got way too much on the line. She's fighting for her legacy. I'm taking Kayla Harrison. Calvin Kattar versus Aljamain Sterling. So this fight is Aljamain's first fight at 145. I'm very excited for this because he cuts a lot of weight to get to bantamweight, and I think it's probably too much. And I think it's better for him longevity-wise to be moving up. And he's fighting Calvin Kattar. So this is actually a really interesting matchup. And let's just kind of run through the numbers. So Calvin Kattar is 23-7. Aljamain Sterling is 23-4. Calvin Kattar has 11 knockout wins, 2 submission wins, and 10 decision wins. Aljamain Sterling has 3 knockout wins, 8 submission wins, and 11 decision wins. Calvin Kattar has 1 knockout loss, 1 submission loss, and 5 decision losses. Aljamain Sterling has 2 knockout losses and 2 decision losses. Calvin Kattar has a total of 12 UFC fights. Aljamain Sterling has 19 UFC fights. The UFC record for Calvin Kattar is 7-5. Aljamain Sterling is 15-4. Calvin Kattar is 2-3 in his last 5 fights. Aljamain Sterling is 4-1. Calvin Kattar is 36 years old. Aljamain Sterling is 34. Calvin Kattar is going to be the taller fighter here. He is 5'11". Aljamain Sterling is 5'7". Calvin Kattar has a 1-inch reach advantage. His reach is 72 inches versus Aljamain Sterling's 71 inch, and they are both orthodox fighters. Looking at these striking statistics, I definitely would say that Calvin Kattar has the advantage in the striking. The Max Holloway fight kind of took a lot out of him. I do think he still has the advantage on the feet. I don't think that Aljamain has much for him in the stand-up. And not that Aljamain is a bad striker, I just think that Kattar is a better striker. And I think that the stats don't really reflect that, but I'm going to go ahead and read them off anyways. So significant strikes landed per minute for Calvin Kattar, 5.12, 4.73 for Aljamain Sterling. Striking accuracy, 39% for Calvin Kattar, 52% for Aljamain Sterling. Strikes absorbed per minute, 7.1 for Calvin Kattar, 2.41 for Aljamain Sterling. Striking defense, 54% for Calvin Kattar, 58% for Aljamain Sterling. Now let's look at the grappling. This is where I think Aljamain Sterling has a huge advantage if he can get Calvin Kattar to the ground. So Calvin Kattar has 0.42 takedown average, and Aljamain Sterling has 1.97. Takedown accuracy is 29% for Calvin Kattar, 24% for Aljamain Sterling. Takedown defense, 91% for Calvin Kattar, 45% for Aljamain Sterling. Average submission attempts per 15 minutes, 0.1 for Calvin Kattar, 0.8 for Aljamain Sterling. Total takedowns landed in the UFC, 5 for Calvin Kattar, 33 for Aljamain Sterling. Total knockdowns, 5 for Calvin Kattar and 0 for Aljamain Sterling. Number of times knocked down in the UFC, 0 for Calvin Kattar and 4 for Aljamain Sterling. So I think if the fight stays standing, there's absolutely no way Aljamain Sterling is going to win. I think Aljamain Sterling absolutely has to get this to the ground. I just wonder how much of an advantage was his size at 135. You know, I don't know. Calvin Kattar's not a massive 145er, but he's not small. He's definitely on the bigger side for the division. So I don't know what to expect here as far as grappling goes, just with this being his first fight at featherweight. I don't know if Aljamain Sterling is going to be stronger because he's not having to dehydrate himself as much and cut all this weight, or if, you know, that's going to translate differently to where he doesn't have the same kind of size advantage that he did when he was fighting at bantamweight. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but I do think that Aljamain Sterling has a massive advantage in the grappling, and I think that Calvin Kattar has a big advantage in the striking, especially with Aljamain coming off the knockout loss to Sean O'Malley. I mean, I don't know what that's going to do to his confidence. I don't know what that's going to do to just his ability to handle a good striker. So I think if I were to predict this, I would say Aljamain Sterling by decision or submission maybe. But I would say probably more likely a decision for Aljamain. I don't know why. I feel like he's not going to submit Calvin for some reason. I don't know why, but I think that if Aljamain can't get it to the ground, though, I think he's going to be in real trouble with Calvin Kattar and might even get knocked out. So I think he needs to be really careful with striking with Calvin. I've seen him make just some mistakes in striking before with Jan and with some other fighters, with O'Malley, obviously, but I've seen him do it in some other fights. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I like his chances on the feet with Calvin Kattar. And the thing is that, like, Aljamain had a tough time on the ground with Petr Yan in their first fight. So just because Calvin Kattar is a blue belt doesn't mean that he doesn't have a chance in the grappling. I think that he absolutely does. I just think that Aljamain will probably get the better positions and ultimately grind out a decision. I don't think it's going to be anything flashy. I don't think it's going to be spectacular. I could be totally wrong, but that's just what I'm expecting. You know, facing somebody like Calvin Kattar, Aljamain's first fight in the weight class, he probably wants to feel it out a little bit, you know, and so I'm not expecting too much from him with his first fight at featherweight. I think we'll see more out of him in his second fight at featherweight. So I'm going to go with Aljamain Sterling by decision. I can't believe we are still on the prelims. Yuri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. I've watched both these guys for a while now, and I would say I have been more impressed with Yuri than I have been with Rakic, but I do think Rakic has a lot of potential. So let's go through the numbers. So Yuri Prochazka, 29-4-1 in professional MMA. Alexander Rakic is 14-3. Yuri Prochazka, 25 knockout wins. That is absolutely insane. 3 submission wins and 1 decision win. Alexander Rakic has 9 knockout wins, 1 submission win, and 4 decision wins. Yuri Prochazka has 3 knockout losses and 1 submission loss. Alexander Rakic has 1 knockout loss and 1 submission loss. And he also has 1 loss via decision. Total number of UFC fights for Yuri Prochazka is 4 fights in the UFC. Alexander Rakic has 8. But Yuri Prochazka did fight for Rizin before, which is a Japanese-based MMA organization. So he does have some high-level MMA experience. It just wasn't in the US or in the UFC. So record in last 5, 4-1 for Yuri Prochazka and 3-2 for Alexander Rakic. One thing I am a little concerned about with Yuri is coming off the injury. You know, he had a really bad shoulder injury. Yuri Prochazka is 31 years old. Alexander Rakic is 32. Yuri Prochazka is 6'4". Alexander Rakic has a 1-inch height advantage at 6'5". Yuri Prochazka has an 80-inch reach. Alexander Rakic has a 78-inch reach. They're both orthodox fighters. Getting into the striking statistics. So I actually do think that we are going to see a lot of striking in this fight. I don't know that it is going to go to the ground. If it did, I would think that maybe Yuri would initiate it, but I think he's going to keep it on the feet for a while. I actually do, because I do think that Yuri has the advantage here in the striking. So significant strikes landed per minute for Yuri Prochazka, 5.31, 4.01 for Alexander Rakic. Yuri Prochazka has 55% striking accuracy, 50% for Rakic. Strikes absorbed per minute, 5.17 for Yuri, so not the best defense there, but does have very good offense. And with him having more of a like Muay Thai background, that's kind of what I would expect. Much better offensively than defensively. Strikes absorbed per minute for Alex Rakic, 2.3. Striking defense, 53%. So he definitely has better defense, but I do think offensively, Yuri is an absolute problem on the feet. Takedown average for Yuri Prochazka, 0.61. 0.82 for Rakic. Takedown accuracy for Prochazka is 50% versus 25% for Rakic. Takedown defense, 68% for Prochazka and 90% for Rakic. Average submission attempts per 15 minutes, 0.3 and 0.2 for Rakic. Total takedowns landed in the UFC, 2 for Prochazka and 5 for Rakic. Alexander Rakic is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. I do think that Rakic, despite the fact that I think that Yuri would probably be the one to initiate the takedowns, for some reason I just feel like he would in this fight, but I do think that Rakic is better on the ground. I think that Yuri has an advantage on the feet. I think he has an experience advantage, but I do think that Rakic is really good on the ground. So I think that is where he would have probably his best moments in this fight. My prediction for this fight is Yuri Prochazka via knockout. I just have a weird feeling that Yuri Prochazka is going to get this win back. He's on the same card with Jamal Hill. If Jamal Hill wins against Pereira, there's a story there. They could totally sell that fight. Yuri Prochazka is fighting for more than a win here. I think he's fighting for a look back into the title picture. And so I think that Yuri is going to really make a run here. I think he is going to come out guns a-blazing. I think we're going to see just the old Yuri that we saw before that made us think that he was going to beat Alex Pereira. Like, I actually thought he had a chance in that fight. So I'm going with Yuri Prochazka via knockout. That is my prediction. I do think, though, that Alexander Rakic has some opportunities to win. I just think that he's going to have to get it to the ground. And I think that would probably be more likely his route to victory would be a decision. I think Yuri Prochazka, he's a finisher. I could see him getting a knockout here. So I'm going with Yuri Prochazka via knockout. Finally, we have arrived to the main card. And oddly enough, all the fights that we just talked about feel like they should be on the main card. And this one doesn't, let's be honest. And I get it, Bo Nickal's a big star. He's a Penn State wrestler, but come on. We could have put Jim Miller versus Bobby Green on the main card or something. You know, I think that yeah, this isn't a main card fight, in my opinion. But whatever. I'm not going to be too salty about it. I'm so excited for this fight, honestly. Bo Nickal, he is 5-0. He's a Penn State wrestler. Not only a Penn State wrestler, just a very decorated Penn State wrestler. And for those who don't know as much about wrestling, Penn State is one of the more prestigious schools to come from as a wrestler. So if you're competing with Penn State in wrestling, like if you are an athlete with Penn State, that's a big deal. So just him being a Penn State wrestler is a big deal. And then for him to have the achievements that he has in wrestling, it's just incredible. So Bo Nickal is 5-0. Cody Brundage is 10-5. Bo Nickal has 2 knockout wins and 3 submission wins. So all of his wins by way of finish, 100% finish rate. Cody Brundage has 5 knockout wins, 3 submission wins, and 1 decision win. He has 2 knockout losses, 1 submission loss, and 2 decision losses. Total number of UFC fights is 2 for Bo Nickal, and the fight before that was the Contender Series, where Dana White gave him a contract, and then eventually he made his debut. Cody Brundage has 8 UFC fights, so quite a bit more experience in the UFC octagon for Cody Brundage. Record in the last 5, obviously Bo Nickal's 5-0, and Cody Brundage is 2-3. And Cody Brundage has a UFC record of 4-4. Bo Nickal has a UFC record of 2-0. Bo Nickal is the younger fighter by 1 year. He's 28, and Cody Brundage is 29. The height is the same. They're both 6'1", and the reach for Bo Nickal is 75 inches, and for Cody Brundage, it is 72 inches. Bo Nickal is a southpaw, and Cody Brundage is orthodox. So let's go ahead and look at the striking statistics. Significant strikes landed per minute, 2.76 for Bo Nickal, 1.8 for Cody Brundage. Striking accuracy, 62% for Bo Nickal, 55% for Cody Brundage. And that's kind of hard to judge, though, because Bo Nickal hasn't had very many fights. So we're literally basing this off of like a few minutes of octagon time. So I don't really take these statistics. I take them with a grain of salt. They're going to be very skewed for Bo Nickal. So yeah, I wouldn't rely on these at all when you're making your prediction. And if there's a fighter who has less than 5 fights, really you can't even, I mean, you can tell some things with it, but it's hard to really judge based off the statistics when they're this early in their UFC career. So striking defense for Bo Nickal, 75%. Takedown average, 11.04%. Takedown accuracy, 50%. And nobody's ever even attempted to take him down. So it'll be interesting if Cody Brundage decides to try that. I don't think he will, but who knows? Cody Brundage, he has 1.8 significant strikes landed per minute, 55% striking accuracy, 2.51 strikes absorbed per minute, 43% striking defense, 2.69 takedown average, 52% takedown accuracy, and 73% takedown defense. So actually pretty decent takedown defense for Cody Brundage, but he's never fought a wrestler like Bo Nickal, let's be real. Average submission per 15 minutes, 13.8 for Bo Nickal. That is extremely skewed. Obviously, he has not even had a full, I don't even think he's seen a second round in the UFC. So for Cody Brundage, average submission attempts per 15 minutes is 1.1. Total knockdowns landed in the UFC, 1 for Bo Nickal, 2 for Cody Brundage. They are both blue belts in jiu-jitsu, and they both wrestled NCAA. Now, little different for Bo Nickal. He was D1, Penn State, all that jazz. So I think that he definitely has the better grappling resume. I just think that Cody Brundage has the advantage in experience, and I think that's going to be a big deal. I think Bo Nickal is going to face adversity in this fight. I really do. I like Bo Nickal, and I actually do think he will be champion at some point, and I do think he's going to win. But I think that Bo Nickal is going to face some adversity, but I think eventually he's going to figure out a way to get on top, land some ground and pound. So I am taking Bo Nickal via TKO. That is my prediction for this fight. Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. This is the fight I am most excited about. I think the winner of this fight has a really big chance of getting the next title shot. With there being so much movement at lightweight right now, and with the Dustin Poirier versus Islam fight being booked, I do think that there is a chance that the winner of this might not get the next title shot, but I do think that, especially if Arman wins, then he will eventually get a title shot against Islam, or possibly an interim or vacant title type situation, depending on what happens. But nonetheless, this is a huge fight for the lightweight division. Charles Oliveira, he has the most finishes in UFC history. He also has the most submissions. Charles Oliveira is 34-9 with 1 no contest. Arman Tsarukyan is 21-3. Charles Oliveira has 10 knockout wins. Arman has 9. Charles Oliveira has 21 submission wins. Arman has 5. Charles Oliveira has 3 decision wins. Arman has 7. Charles has 4 knockout losses, 4 submission losses, and 1 decision loss. Arman Tsarukyan has 1 knockout loss, which was before the UFC, and he has 2 decision losses. So, UFC record for Charles Oliveira is 22-9 with 1 no contest. So he's been in the UFC a lot longer. He's got a lot more fights. He's got 32 UFC fights. And Arman Tsarukyan is 8-2 in the UFC. He has 10 UFC fights. They are both 4-1 in their last 5 fights. Charles Oliveira is going to be a little bit older. He is 34. Arman Tsarukyan is 27. Charles Oliveira is 5'10". He has a 74-inch reach, so he's a little bit taller, has a longer reach. Arman Tsarukyan is 5'7" and has a 72-inch reach. They are both orthodox fighters. Charles Oliveira, significant strikes landed per minute, 3.54. Arman Tsarukyan, 3.85. Charles Oliveira, striking accuracy, 53%. Arman Tsarukyan, 48%. So Charles Oliveira, again, he's a very offensive fighter. Offensively, I think Charles has the advantage in the striking, and defensively, I think Arman does. Strikes absorbed per minute for Charles Oliveira, 3.19. Arman Tsarukyan, 1.91. That's actually really good. Striking defense, 51% for Charles Oliveira, 54% for Arman. And then in the grappling, so takedown average for Charles Oliveira is 2.32, 3.4 for Arman Tsarukyan. Takedown accuracy is 40% for Charles Oliveira and 36% for Arman. Takedown defense, 55% for Charles Oliveira and 75% for Arman Tsarukyan. Average submission attempts per 15 minutes, 2.7 for Charles Oliveira. Total takedowns landed in the UFC. This is really interesting. So Charles Oliveira has landed 34 takedowns in his 32 UFC fights, and Arman Tsarukyan has landed 28, which if you consider he's only had 10 fights, that's actually quite a few. And then total knockdowns landed in the UFC, Charles Oliveira has landed 8 knockdowns, and Arman Tsarukyan has landed 3. Arman Tsarukyan has never been knocked down in the UFC. He has been hurt, he has been stunned, but technically he has never been knocked down. Charles Oliveira has been knocked down 5 times in the UFC. So, now when it comes to the grappling, Charles Oliveira is a 3rd-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, and Arman Tsarukyan is a master of sport in freestyle wrestling. He's also training with a very high-level wrestling coach. His wrestling coach is a 3-time freestyle wrestling champion. So, I think that that is very important, and if his coach is going to be there, if he's in the U.S., because I know they were trying to get a visa, I think that's going to be a huge game changer for him, especially with coaching him. And I don't know, I would think he would probably have him in his corner, so that's really important. Shortest fight time for Charles Oliveira is 41 seconds, and longest fight time is actually 15 minutes. He's never gone a full 5 rounds, or a full 25 minutes, which kind of shocks me, honestly. Arman Tsarukyan, he has gone a full 25 minutes. Most strikes landed in one fight for Charles Oliveira, 73, and 95 for Arman. So, yeah, I mean, the statistics in this fight, it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of, I don't really ever, want to base fights off statistics, especially not this one, because Charles Oliveira has triple the amount of fights in the UFC as Arman, so the statistics are kind of hard to judge, so you can take it with a grain of salt. I think the biggest thing here when you're looking at these statistics is the defense for Arman. It's pretty clear that he has a better defense, and then for Charles Oliveira, he's got just really good offense. So that to me is what this reflects, in my opinion. Charles Oliveira, he has incredible jiu-jitsu. Obviously, he has the most submissions in UFC history. To me, Charles Oliveira has figured out a way to incorporate jiu-jitsu into MMA better than a lot of other fighters have, in my opinion. And he also has great striking. So I feel like he's so known for his grappling that people forget about his Muay Thai. Charles Oliveira has excellent Muay Thai. He's a very offensive fighter, and he does sacrifice some defense for that, but I do think that makes him very dangerous. And I think that if you want to be a finisher, if you want to be very offensive, I think you do have to take risks and you do have to sacrifice some defense. So Charles Oliveira, because he is so offensive, he is very hard to control on the ground, which I think will be a problem for Arman, depending on the positions. And he is hittable, though. So I think that Arman could have some success on the feet as long as he doesn't get caught by Charles Oliveira. I do think he'd be better off taking this fight to the ground. But at the same time, Charles Oliveira, he gets dropped all the time. He's been dropped almost in every single fight, it seems like, lately. So even though he wins, he's still getting dropped. And I think that you can't do that with Arman. I think Arman will absolutely smell blood in the water, and he will capitalize on that. If Charles is hurt, if Charles gets dropped, I don't think there's any chance he's going to win this fight. So while that might work with somebody like Michael Chandler, it might work with Dariush, it might work with, some other fighters in the division, I don't think you can make any mistakes with Arman Tsarukyan. I think he's just too good. Arman Tsarukyan, while, he posts stuff on his YouTube of, that he thinks Charles Oliveira is one-dimensional and all this stuff. I truly do not believe that he thinks that. I do think that Arman is taking this fight very seriously, and you can tell by his training. He's very focused. His mindset is on point. So I do not think that Arman is underestimating Charles. I think he's just doing that for clickbait. But I don't know. That's just my take on it. So another thing about Charles Oliveira is just a few concerns that I have is that, like I said, he's hittable. He doesn't have the best defense. It's not terrible, but it's just not as good as I think it should be against somebody like Arman, who's a very well-prepared fighter. I think that could be a flaw. And you see that a lot with Muay Thai. You see that a lot with these type of strikers. And like I said, Charles Oliveira is just a very offensive fighter. And that's why he has the most finishes. That's why he's in that position. So he takes risks, but at the same time, he finishes fights. One thing about Charles Oliveira, though, and I think that we will be able to tell immediately who is going to win the fight. As soon as the fight starts, I think we're going to know, because it's going to be a matter of who is the one pressuring. If Arman is pressuring right away, then I think Arman is going to win the fight. If Charles is pressuring right away like he normally does, then I think Charles has a good chance of winning the fight. But Charles is not very comfortable fighting backwards. He's not as good offensively when he is being pushed toward the fence, when he's being controlled. It's just, I have a very big concern with that with Charles. So if Arman pressures him early, I think he might even be able to finish him on the feet. So it's just going to really depend on which Charles Oliveira shows up. Just the fact that he gave up top position so early in the Dariush fight, I do not think that he should pull guard or play any kind of games on the ground with Arman. And I know Charles Oliveira is a third-degree black belt in jiu-jitsu. I know he has the most finishes, the most submissions. I know he's very good on the ground. I think in this fight that Charles Oliveira is going to struggle on the ground with Arman. I do think it's possible that he could reverse him and get a submission. Of course, that's always possible. But at the end of the day, with Arman's style of grappling, I just don't think it's a very good match for Charles Oliveira on the ground. I think that Charles Oliveira should really avoid giving up top position at all costs. I think top position is where Arman does his best work. So I think that if Charles Oliveira wants to get this fight finished on the ground or win the fight on the ground, I think he's going to have to get top position. I don't think he's going to do it off his back. I don't think he's going to do it from some kind of lucky submission. I think Arman is way too hip to that. I think he is prepared for that. And I think that Charles is really going to have to be careful on the ground with Arman. And a lot of people are thinking that Charles has a huge advantage on the ground here, but I don't buy into that at all. I think Arman Tsarukyan is the better overall grappler. I think Charles has the better jiu-jitsu. He has the better submissions, but I think Arman has better top pressure, and I think he has better wrestling. I also think that he has better ground and pound. So I could see Arman taking him down, pushing him against the fence, and trying to finish the fight there via ground and pound. And we did see Charles Oliveira in that position in the Michael Chandler fight. I think if Arman is in that same position that Michael Chandler was in, he finishes the fight, whereas Michael Chandler makes mistakes, lets him back up, and then ends up getting finished. So Arman, I don't think will make as many mistakes as Michael Chandler did. I think that Arman has much higher fight IQ. I think he's more prepared. I think that he is, and not that Michael Chandler isn't a prepared fighter, because he trains really hard. I mean, he trains a lot. When I say prepared, I mean his mental game. I think that Arman's mental game is untouchable. I think that he is a very intelligent fighter. He's a very mental fighter, but at the same time, he's very strong. He's durable. He's hard to finish. So with this being a 3-round fight, I think this actually does kind of favor Charles, because I think the longer the fight goes, the worse it will get for Charles. But yeah, so kind of going through Arman a little bit, let's kind of run through some details on him. So he has, some losses in the UFC. He lost to Garbrandt, but I thought that was a pretty competitive fight. And I thought that that was actually a good fight for Arman to get some experience. And I think he probably learned a lot from that fight. And he's actually made some adjustments since then. And especially since the fight against Ismagulov, I did notice some adjustments. Like, I've said this in the last video, but, you know, he kind of cleaned up his takedowns. He stays more committed to the takedown and maintains the position longer. He uses the long guard when he's striking, which I think is really important. I think that these are little tiny things that are going to make a huge difference. And I think that's especially going to make a difference early in the fight. And you can see it in the Dariush fight. You know, he was the one pressuring. He was the one that was kind of dictating the pace in that fight. And that's why Dariush got finished so quickly. So I could see this being a first or second round finish for Arman Tsarukyan. And I could also see it being a first or second round finish for Oliveira. But Oliveira, I think his best chance to win this fight is going to be on the feet. I think that Arman Tsarukyan, being the shorter fighter, he's going to have to be careful of head kicks. He's going to have to be careful of getting tied up in a clinch with Charles Oliveira. Charles Oliveira, again, has excellent Muay Thai. I think if Arman initiates a clinch with Charles Oliveira and it's not against the fence, then I think he's going to open himself up to knees to the body, knees to the head, elbows, all kinds of nasty strikes from Charles Oliveira. So I think that Arman needs to be very careful of that. I do think that Oliveira, depending on where he's at, has the advantage in the striking. If Charles Oliveira is being pressured, I think Arman will be able to handle him on the feet. If Charles Oliveira is doing the pressuring, then I think he has a good chance to finish Arman. So, like I said, this is a 50-50 fight in my opinion. It's really going to depend on how that first round goes. I think the first round is going to tell us all we need to know. I think even the first 30 seconds are going to tell us all we need to know. I don't think that, you know, I think people are kind of underestimating Tsarukyan a little bit just because they aren't as familiar with him. I mean, Charles obviously is a huge fan favorite, and a lot of people just really want to see him win, and I want to see him win, obviously, but, you know, this is MMA, and I've been watching these guys for a while, and just from what I've seen from Arman, I'm very confident in his skills, and I'm very confident in his ability to win this fight. So I am leaning toward Arman, but I do think that it is kind of 50-50. I think that Tsarukyan is finally becoming a fully developed fighter. He does a great job of mixing up his attacks, throwing to the head, throwing to the body, throwing to the legs. I think that's very important. If this fight hits the scorecards, or if Charles is unable to do anything to Arman on the feet, because again, Arman is very durable, then I think that Arman is going to win a decision, or he is going to finish it via TKO. So my prediction for this fight is Arman Tsarukyan via TKO. I do think that, like I said, Charles Oliveira has a good chance of winning. I just think that there's a slight edge here for Arman. I think that he is just constantly improving and getting better in all of his skills, not only his grappling, but also his striking. He has very good ground and pound. So the way that I think Arman is going to win this, I think he is going to have to take Charles Oliveira down, push him against the fence, and I think he is going to finish it there with his ground and pound. Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. Justin Gaethje is 25-4. Max Holloway is 25-7. Justin Gaethje has 20 knockout wins, 1 submission win, and 4 decision wins. He has never lost on the scorecard, so all 4 of his losses have been by way of finish. He's been submitted twice, and he's been knocked out or TKO'd twice. So Max Holloway, he has 11 knockout wins, 2 submission wins, and 12 decision wins. So Max Holloway, he has never been knocked out. He's actually never been knocked down. And he has 1 submission loss and 6 decision losses. Total number of UFC fights for Justin are 12 fights and 28 fights for Max Holloway. Now, one thing that's very important to consider in this fight is the fact that Justin Gaethje has never actually gone a full 25 minutes. So he has seen a 5th round in the Tony Ferguson fight, but he's never gone a full 25 minutes. So those numbers are kind of interesting because Justin Gaethje's never lost a decision, but with this being a 5-round fight, I do kind of wonder how he's going to be against Max Holloway in the final 2 rounds, because Max Holloway has so much 5-round experience. I don't think Gaethje's cardio is going to be an issue at all. I think that it's more of Max Holloway's fight IQ and his ability to land so much volume. I think that's where Max Holloway has the advantage. So kind of interesting statistics, but again, it's hard to judge just because they have such a different, career. Justin Gaethje, he's been in 12 UFC fights. Max Holloway's been in 28, so it's a big difference. Justin Gaethje in the UFC is 8-4. Max Holloway's 21-7. Record in their last 5. Justin Gaethje's 3-2. Max Holloway is 4-1. Justin Gaethje is a little bit older. He is 35, and Max Holloway is 32. The height is the same. They're both 5'11", despite Max Holloway moving up from a lighter division. He is not going to be at a disadvantage in the height. Justin Gaethje does have a slightly longer reach at 70 inches, and they are both orthodox fighters. Significant strikes landed per minute. These guys both put on a pretty brutal pace, and Justin Gaethje has 7.35 significant strikes landed per minute. Max Holloway has 7.17. Striking accuracy is 60% for Justin Gaethje and 47% for Max Holloway. Strikes absorbed per minute for Justin Gaethje is actually pretty high. It's 7.5. And for Max Holloway, it's 4.75. So with Max Holloway being such a volume striker and having such good hand speed, I actually do think he's going to have a speed advantage in this fight. That does concern me, because if Justin Gaethje is absorbing that amount of strikes per minute and Max Holloway is putting on a faster pace than he's probably ever experienced, I am a little worried that he's going to fall behind. So yeah, it'll be interesting. But striking defense, Justin Gaethje 53%, Max Holloway's 59%. Max Holloway definitely has the better defense. I think he just has the better boxing overall. I think that Gaethje has the better offensive striking than Max Holloway. I think he has way more power. I think he has better leg kicks, and actually I think he just has better kickboxing in general, but I think that Max Holloway has the better boxing both offensively and defensively. So I think that there is a possibility that Max could get finished in this fight, but ultimately I think that if it goes all 5 rounds, I'm probably favoring Max Holloway in this fight. And then takedown accuracy for Justin Gaethje is 25%, and for Max Holloway, 53%. Takedown average, 0.13 for Gaethje and 0.27 for Max Holloway. Takedown defense, 75% for Justin Gaethje and 84% for Max Holloway. I don't anticipate we see a lot of grappling in this fight, but I know they've both been training grappling. I've watched some of their training footage. So there is a possibility, but I don't know if they're just doing that to be more prepared or if they are planning to grapple. So we'll see. Average submission attempts per 15 minutes, 0 for Justin Gaethje and 0.3 for Max Holloway. Total takedowns landed in UFC, 1 for Justin Gaethje and 7 for Max Holloway. Total knockdowns landed in the UFC. Justin Gaethje has landed 6 knockdowns. Max Holloway has landed 10. Number of times knocked down in the UFC, Justin Gaethje has been knocked down twice, and Max Holloway has never been knocked down. In the grappling, I don't know who has the better grappling, honestly, because Justin Gaethje did wrestle D1 in NCAA, and Max Holloway is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, so they're both pretty decent on the ground. I actually might favor Max Holloway on the ground in this fight, which is kind of crazy, but I do actually think he might have better grappling, but I just don't know. It's really hard to say, just because we haven't seen either of them grapple a whole lot. You know, they're mostly strikers, so it's interesting. But I think that Max Holloway might surprise people on the ground. And then shortest fight time for Justin Gaethje's 12 seconds. Shortest fight time for Max Holloway's 1 minute 39 seconds. Longest fight time for Justin Gaethje's 23 minutes 39 seconds. 25 minutes for Max Holloway. Most strikes landed in one fight, 143 for Gaethje and 445 for Max Holloway. So definitely Max Holloway is the more volume-heavy striker. I feel like Justin Gaethje is better at finishing fights. He has knockout power. He's got excellent leg kicks. So I think this fight is going to come down to the game plan. If Justin Gaethje's game plan is to kind of wear down Max Holloway with the leg kicks and, you know, just kind of... I mean, in the Volkanovski fight, Max Holloway got hit with a lot of leg kicks, and Volkanovski's leg kicks are not nearly as powerful as Justin Gaethje's. So I do think that will be a huge problem for Max Holloway. I think that if Max Holloway can check the leg kicks or at least avoid them, and he does have good defense, then I think he'll be okay. That is one thing I do really worry about, though. And not so much that it's going to, that Max is going to get finished. I just think it's going to slow down his movement, and he's not going to be able to land as much volume as he normally does. So then I think that's a way that Justin could win on the scorecards, would be to just brutalize Max Holloway's legs. And yeah, I just think that this fight, even with the leg kicks and all that being said, I do think this fight does favor Max Holloway on the scorecards. I think that the best route to victory for Justin Gaethje would probably be a finish if he would try to knock Max Holloway out or maybe take him down and finish him there. I don't know. But I do think that Max Holloway probably has a little bit better fight IQ, but I do think that Justin Gaethje has more power and does way more damage. So I don't know. I also don't know with Max Holloway moving up to 155 if he's going to have the same kind of hand speed that he had at 145, because it looks like he bulked up a little bit. So I'm not sure. I don't know if it's going to translate as well to 155 as it did at 145. But this isn't the first time that Holloway's fought at lightweight either. So I don't know. I think that Justin Gaethje has a power advantage, and I think that Holloway has a speed advantage. So it's really just going to depend on which one is better. I don't know. I think that Holloway could win this fight. And if I had to predict this, I would probably go with Holloway by decision, but I think it's going to be close. I think this is actually going to be a really close fight. I think it might be a controversial decision. I think it's going to be similar to the Volkanovski fights, which actually makes me really excited. So I do think this fight is going to go the distance. I know that Justin Gaethje has the ability to finish Max Holloway, but since nobody's been able to do it so far, I just can't get to that point mentally where I can say, oh yeah, I think Justin Gaethje is going to finish him, just because it's never been done before. So until somebody finishes Max Holloway, I think I'm going with the safer bet to assume that he's going to survive. And I think that Max Holloway is going to edge it on the scorecards just with his sheer volume. So I'm going with Max Holloway by decision, but I do think that if it doesn't go all 5 rounds, it will probably be a finish for Justin Gaethje. I don't think Max Holloway is going to finish Justin. I really don't. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be really close. That's what I think. I think this is going to be an absolute war. So I think Max Holloway might be able to pull this off, but I'm not sure. So it's, I don't know. This is one of the hardest fights on this card to predict, in my opinion. I think all these fights are hard to predict besides maybe the Bo Nickal fight. But yeah, it's really hard because they're both so good and they're just so different too at the same time. They have different attacks. And yeah, Max Holloway just has such good defense. He's got such a good chin. I think he might be able to do this. I think he might pull this off. So yeah, I'm going Max Holloway by decision. Zhang Weili versus Yan Xiaonan. I am so excited for this. This is a strawweight title fight. This is a huge fight for women's MMA, a huge fight for the division. I believe this is the first time that a Chinese champion is facing a Chinese challenger in a title fight. So a very historic fight, and I'm very excited for it. What's very interesting about China is that they have just a lot of different styles of martial arts that we don't have here and they don't have in Brazil or other countries. So it's really interesting to see them start to kind of make waves in the UFC. Zhang Weili is 24-3. Yan Xiaonan is 17-3 with 1 no contest. Zhang Weili has 11 knockout wins, 8 submission wins, and 5 decision wins. She has 1 knockout loss, and she has 2 decision losses. She has never been submitted. Xiaonan has 8 knockout wins, 9 submission wins, 0 decision wins. She has 1 knockout loss, 1 submission loss, and 1 decision loss. Weili has 10 UFC fights, and Xiaonan has 9. Zhang Weili is 8-2 in the UFC, and Xiaonan is 7-2. Record in the last 5, they're both 3-2 in their last 5 fights. They're both 34 years old. Zhang Weili is 5'4", Xiaonan is 5'5". Weili has a 63-inch reach, and so does Xiaonan. Zhang Weili is a switch stance fighter, and Yan is orthodox. So looking at Weili, the striking stats, 5.94 significant strikes landed per minute, 5.55 for Yan. Striking accuracy for Weili, 51% and 44% for Xiaonan. Weili has 3.44 significant strikes absorbed per minute, 3.56 for Xiaonan. 53% striking defense for Weili and 61% for Xiaonan. I do think that Xiaonan has the better striking. I think she has better boxing. She'll be a problem for Weili to deal with on the feet, in my opinion. So I think that Zhang is going to want to get this fight to the ground. So as far as the grappling goes, Zhang Weili has a 2.29 takedown average, whereas Xiaonan has 0.86. Takedown accuracy is 42% for Zhang Weili and 66% for Xiaonan. Takedown defense is 66% for Zhang Weili and 70% for Xiaonan. Average submission attempts per 15 minutes, 0.4 for Weili and 0 for Xiaonan. Weili has 19 takedowns landed in the UFC versus 8 for Xiaonan. Weili has 3 knockdowns landed and has been knocked down once. Xiaonan has 1 knockdown and has never been knocked down herself. Weili is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu and Xiaonan is a blue belt, so big difference there. Shortest fight time for Weili is 42 seconds versus 2 minutes 20 seconds for Xiaonan. They've both gone a full 25 minutes. Most significant strikes landed in one fight, 165 for Weili and 150 for Xiaonan. This fight, I think, is going to be really interesting because I do think that Xiaonan has the advantage in the striking. I do think that Zhang Weili might be in danger if she tries to strike with Xiaonan, and I think that she's probably going to want to get this fight to the ground. The one thing that I really admire about Zhang Weili is in her grappling abilities is her ability to land strikes from pretty much any position. She can do damage from anywhere. She's excellent in the clinch. She's excellent on the ground, whether she's in top mount, side control. If she gets back control, she can do damage from anywhere. So I am predicting that Zhang Weili is going to win via TKO. I think she is going to take Yan down, and I think she is going to land ground and pound and eventually finish her. So that is my prediction for this fight, is Zhang Weili via TKO. We have finally made it to the main event. Holy crap, this fight is insane. I have been rewatching their fights. I've probably rewatched Jamal Hill's fights like 3 times each, at least, if not more. And Pereira, the same thing. I've been going back and forth watching these, doing a lot of research. Alex Pereira has 7 knockout wins, 0 submission wins, and 2 decision wins. Jamal Hill has 7 knockout wins and 5 decision wins. He's never submitted anyone either, so neither of them have any submission wins. They've both been knocked out twice, technically, but Jamal Hill's knockout was actually an injury, so I don't really count that. And he actually was still fighting while his arm was just kind of like limping around for a while, so it just shows you how tough he is. And I think he would have kept going if the ref wouldn't have stopped it, so it was kind of crazy. But that was in the Paul Craig fight where he got his arm like dislocated. And then Alex Pereira, he does have 1 submission loss, so Total number of UFC fights, 7 for Alex and 9 for Jamal. Alex is 6-1 in the UFC. Jamal is 7-1 with 1 no contest, I believe. It was, gosh, what happened? Oh, I think that was the one where he tested positive for marijuana and they took his win away. It was originally a TKO win, and they took it away because he tested positive for marijuana, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So that's pretty stupid. So really, he's 13, and we'll say he's 13-1 because that just annoys me. 4-1 in their last 5 for both of them. Alex Pereira is the older fighter. He's 36. Jamal Hill is 32. I really don't think age matters that much in these heavier divisions, so I take that with a grain of salt. I think if this were flyweight, featherweight, bantamweight, lightweight, then the age kind of matters, but in these heavier divisions, I just don't think it matters that much. I really don't. I mean, look at Glover. Look what he's been able to do. So the height for both of them, they are both 6'4". They both have a 79-inch reach. Alex Pereira, he is an orthodox fighter, and Jamal Hill is a southpaw. Significant strikes landed per minute, 5 for Alex Pereira and 7.31 for Jamal Hill. Striking accuracy for Alex is 62%. He actually has some of the most accurate striking in the UFC. Jamal has 54% striking accuracy. Strikes absorbed per minute, 3.65 for Pereira and 3.35 for Hill. Striking defense is 50% for Alex, 47% for Hill. Takedown average for Alex is 0.19. Takedown average for Jamal Hill is 0. Takedown accuracy is 100% for Alex Pereira. Takedown defense is 70% and 73% for Jamal Hill. Average submission attempts per 15 minutes is 0.4 for Alex Pereira. I noticed one thing that Alex Pereira likes to do when he's being taken down is he will immediately try for a guillotine before you even start to attempt the takedown. Like, as soon as you get him up against the fence, he's probably going to try for a guillotine. I don't think he's probably going to get it in this fight, so I think that would be a waste of time. But I've seen him do it pretty much every time. He did it in the Yuri fight, and he did it in the Jan fight too. But I think defensively on the ground that Jamal Hill's pretty good. He survived 5 rounds with Glover on the ground. So, and I know they weren't on the ground the whole time, but they spent a decent amount of time on the ground, and Jamal Hill made it out alive. So I think that just shows that he can probably survive on the ground with anybody. And Alex, you know, he's a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, so I don't think people should sleep on Pereira's grappling, and he trains with Glover, so that's literally his coach. So I don't think we should sleep on his grappling, but I do think that Jamal Hill might have better grappling than Pereira. So kickboxing record for Alex is 33-7, and he actually is 1-0 in boxing as well. So I think the striking advantage goes to Alex. I just think that he has a lot of issues with defense, and especially when he gets you backed up to the fence, I think that's actually where he gets himself in the most danger. And when we saw it in the Adesanya fight, because he kind of just throws caution to the wind and he'll just start swinging, trying to finish the fight. And I think he opens himself up for counters when he does that. And Jamal Hill is a really good counter striker. He's really good at finding openings. And I think that might be where Jamal Hill might be able to capitalize on hurting Alex Pereira at least. I don't know if he'll knock him out there, but I think he has the ability to. The only thing I'm concerned about in this fight, and actually also Alex has never gone a full 25 minutes. So Jamal Hill has gone a full 25 minutes. So I think if this fight goes the distance, honestly, I think it favors Jamal. Honestly, I think Jamal has better fight IQ. I think he's more durable. And I think he lands more volume. So here's one thing about this fight that really has nothing to do with the numbers, has nothing to do with their fighting style, has nothing to do with their talent, their skill. The fact is, Jamal Hill was injured 8 months ago. He ruptured his Achilles tendon in his left leg. So I think that's going to be a huge problem. I think he probably should have waited a full year to come back. So with all that being said, I actually think that if Jamal didn't have the injury, I would be picking Jamal Hill in this fight via TKO. But since he has the injury, I think it's going to be very difficult for him once it gets to like the second round, third round, especially fourth round. As the fight goes on, I think that leg is going to bother him more and more. So I am nervous about that, especially with it being his left leg, which presents multiple problems. So the first problem that's going to happen is and Jamal Hill is a southpaw. So if he's in the southpaw stance, his right leg is his lead leg, his left leg is his rear leg. So the issue with that is that he will be pivoting on his left leg when he throws his two, or when he throws anything with his rear hand. He's going to be pivoting on his left leg. Also, he's going to be obviously moving around. I think it's going to, I hate to say this, but I think his footwork is going to suffer because of that. When you're a southpaw and your left leg is compromised, that makes it really difficult not only to pivot on it and to generate power from that backhand, but it also makes it really difficult to move around. So I don't think we're going to see him really moving around a ton on the feet. I think he's going to be a little bit more flat-footed, which could, I don't know, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think that's how he's going to have to fight. In Jamal Hill, he switches to orthodox quite a bit, so that would help with him not pivoting as much on that left leg. But I think that would also create problems because then he opens himself up to leg kicks. So when Jamal Hill is in southpaw, I think that's when he's going to be probably doing the best work. So if he can finish this fight early, I think that he actually has a really good chance to win. I just think he's going to have to probably finish it early. And I think he might want to try to take it to the ground as well. So I think that just with him having the injury, that's the only reason I say that, because I think, like I said, for the further the fight goes on, I think the more that's going to become a problem for him. Also, I think that Jamal Hill is going to struggle when he's switching to orthodox, because that's when he's opening himself up to leg kicks from Alex. And Alex has really nasty leg kicks. They're very fast and you can't really see them coming. So I think that's going to be a problem. And with him injuring that leg, because when he switches to orthodox, then his left leg is going to become his lead leg. And his lead leg is the one that's going to be open to the calf kicks. And with him having an ankle injury, a ruptured Achilles tendon, and it's only been 8 months, I think if he takes a few of those calf kicks, he's going to be screwed. So I'm really nervous about that for Jamal Hill. And honestly, I really want to see him win, because I really want to see him versus Yuri. Like, if Yuri beats Rakic, I really want to see them two fight. And I want to see that as the next light heavyweight title fight. But with that injury and with all that being said, I think that, I think I'm going to go with Alex Pereira. I think it's going to be a late stoppage. I think it's going to be a TKO. So that's my prediction. Unfortunately, I just don't think that you can beat Alex Pereira if you have a compromised leg, especially the left leg, because that's the one that Alex is going to attack. So I'm really nervous about that. But that being said, if Jamal Hill wasn't coming off an injury, I would be picking Jamal Hill easily in this fight. Honestly, I do think Jamal Hill is a more well-rounded fighter, and I do think that he actually is the better fighter in this situation. So I'm going with Pereira, but it's a very much dependent on like the injury. That's the only reason I'm picking Pereira in this fight. I think that it will probably reach a 4th or 5th round. I think it might even go all the way to decision. But I think more than likely what will happen would be like a 4th round or 5th round stoppage for Alex. Because even with a compromised leg, I still think Jamal Hill would be able to win this on the scorecards. But I think that his leg is just such a huge concern for me that, I could see that being an issue. Which, honestly, makes it kind of a less impressive performance if Alex wins, because it's like, okay, you beat a guy that's coming off a major injury. So if Jamal wins, that's huge for him. And that just shows, I mean, that's the thing. He's hard to finish. So I think that it might have to come down to like a doctor stoppage or him just not being able to get up. Like if his leg is really compromised, I don't think he's going to get knocked out. People think that Jamal Hill's going to just get knocked out. I don't think he's going to. I think Jamal Hill has a good chin, and I think he has good enough defense that yeah, I don't think he's going to get knocked out. He does kind of fight with his hands down sometimes, so I am a little worried about that and getting caught. But I actually think it's more likely that we would see Alex get knocked out because he is susceptible to things. And he's been knocked out before by Adesanya. So imagine the kind of power that Jamal Hill has. I mean, yeah. But a couple things about Jamal Hill. He's really good at closing the distance. He is very good at stance switching, which that makes me nervous, though. So, yeah. So I'm going with Alex, but it's a very, there's a big asterisk next to that prediction because it's really all kind of based on the injury. That's why I'm picking Alex. I don't think he's the better fighter, though. I don't. I think Jamal Hill's the better fighter. In MMA. In kickboxing, sure, I'll take Pereira, but in MMA, I'm going with Jamal Hill. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. I hope you really enjoyed this. And let me know in the comments what you think about my predictions. Let me know what you think about the fights. Let me know what your predictions are. I feel like this is the hardest card I have ever had to do predictions for. It was so difficult. I think the only ones that I really felt confident about were Sadiq Yusuff versus Lopes, and then Weili. I felt pretty confident on that one, and then Bo Nickal. But all the other ones, I think they're pretty close. I think a lot of these fights could go either way. Even the Kayla Harrison versus Holly Holm fight, I think a lot of people think that's going to be one-sided, but the more I look into it, the less I think that. And yeah, it's going to be insane. I'm really excited, though. I am leaving on Wednesday to go to Vegas, and I will be at UFC 300. So I'm very excited. And this is going to be my first UFC event, which is absolutely insane. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that has supported me and helped me get to this point to where I'm, now have UFC press credentials. I'm able to attend these events and work these as media. It's absolutely amazing. Thank you to my local community in St. Louis. I appreciate every single one of you for helping support me, because without my community, I don't think I would be where I am. And thank you to just anyone who's encouraged me and supported me along the way. Thank you to my sponsors. Thank you to Mark Lee, Farmers Insurance District. Thank you to The Fighting Now. I appreciate all of you so much. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe so that way you don't miss the next one. And I will see you guys later. Maybe you'll see me at the press conference at UFC 300. So I'm very excited. Thank you so much. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.